with another episode centering around animals, you can instantly tell onto why I decided to pick Frog Wild as the Loud House episode to compete with the Casagrandes' Chameleon. Because for me personally, even if there were other Lana episodes that center around her with animals, I feel like that this episode is the perfect contender. 2 weeks ago, I stated that I'm going to be talking about Adelaide's animals, but it's also Chain's family's animals. And this is the episode I was referring to. What these two episodes have in common is that the main characters need to protect the animals from the de facto antagonists. And when I say de facto, is that these two characters, mainly Principal Huggins and the person in charge of one of the apartments that the Casagrandes live, aren't really that much of an antagonist. I mean, granted, one of them are, but considering that this is centering around them not realizing what the animals can do or how they live their lives, it really shows that they're willing to push the message of how animals are really important. In Frog Wild, Lincoln was really thrilled to dissect frogs, but when Lana showed him a video of her and Hops, Lincoln decides to help Lana to save the frogs. In Chameleon, the Casagrandes need to protect the reptiles from Mr. Scully, otherwise they will be out of the building. When it comes to the main motivations of both of the protagonists of both episodes, you can instantly tell that Lana is desperate to save nearly every single animal, but when it comes to this episode from the Casagrandes, it really shows that Ryan is not only helping her family to stay in the building, but also the Chain family, mainly the fact that Sid is part of the Chain family, while protecting the animals from Mr. Scully. If you ask me, I actually think that the motivations from the Casagrandes make much more sense than Lana's motivations, considering that the Chain family had multiple reptiles in their apartment, and the fact that when a person like Mr. Scully is going to look all over the entire apartments just to make sure that everything is completely secured and animal-free, you can really tell that Ryan and her family are willing to help out another family in order for them and the Chain family to stay in the apartments. When it comes to Lana in Frog Wild, she spent her life in the Loud House and not the apartment. If anything, if she did spend her life in an apartment, she would probably be in the same situation as the Chain family or even the Casagrandes family, considering that she will probably have to make a lot of sacrifices by letting go of animals, and considering that she never sacrifices any of her animals whatsoever, if that is true or not, then you can instantly tell that she is willing to save any animals by any means necessary outside of the Loud House. Now, since this is an episode centering around Lincoln and Lana, I have to admit that their dynamic, while not one of my favorites, I can understand onto why people like the relationship between the two. Like, Lincoln would have had second thoughts of not taking Lana's advice, but let's be real, after the film that Lana showed to Lincoln, how can you say no to that? Granted, it didn't tear me up upon watching it for the first time, but it really makes sense onto why Lincoln is willing to help out Lana. The scene from E.T. where Elliot saves all the frogs, which includes her classmates saving them due to E.T.'s powers after watching TV, it gave me the vibe that Lincoln and Lana are like Elliot, while Hops is like E.T., who is Lana's frog. Whenever I think about that vibe, and if you ever watched E.T. before, you might get the references in this episode, knowing full well that when it comes to saving frogs, I'm pretty sure that if Lincoln and Lana saved different types of species that aren't frogs, I'm pretty sure it won't even work for an episode. I mean, it could work, but considering that Lana has a close relationship with Hops, I'm pretty sure that having frogs as the main focus in this episode really follows the story. But if I'm gonna be real, when it comes to rescuing frogs that are part of a school project, it's nowhere near as complicated compared to what Ryan and her family had went through, because through the majority of the episode, they go to different apartments to protect the reptiles from Mr. Sully by any means necessary. And for me personally, even if what Lincoln and Lana did in Frog Wild was also complicated, it doesn't even compare to the apartments. Like, the Loud House is full of chaos, but at the same time, bigger is usually worse than chaos. Considering that the down-to-earth elements in Chameleon is further proof that Ryan's odds are just a lot more complicated. Like, the biggest disadvantage that Lincoln and Lana had is that Principal Huggins is trying to find the frogs in every single house, and regardless if it was breaking and entering or the invasion of privacy that Principal Huggins is breaking, you can't deny that he's just trying to find the frogs that are part of a school project. And to be honest, the chaos nature in Chameleon as well, Frita is dealing with trauma after witnessing the reptiles, after nearly stepping into the bathtub until she witnessed Ryan and the others. If anything, if you really see how oversensitive Frita is, then this is the episode for you. Trust me, in this episode, I can't even tell if Frita is dealing with trauma or Bobby, whether he faints from witnessing snakes. Because as far as I'm concerned, after the day he wants nothing to do with snakes. Up until he saw Frita and Carlos completely doing their own thing by curing the trauma of snakes. Anyway, let's go talk about the de facto antagonist of Frog Wild, Principal Huggins. Now, I understand why people have expressed why Principal Huggins is the least favorite character in this show. In this episode, he invades the privacy of the families in the properties. In the comic episode, he is willing to get his comment in first before Lincoln and Clyde's comment. I understand where people are coming from. But in all honesty, compared to the teachers and principals in the later seasons, I just really miss the down-to-earth elements in the earlier seasons, because even if Principal Huggins is rude, I can't deny that he took the down-to-earth elements a lot more seriously, because if he experienced anything in the later seasons, mainly magic, ghosts, and mythical dragons from Scotland, even if he ever went to Scotland, then I'm pretty sure that he's basically in the wrong show. You see, whenever I see these characters again after rewatching these episodes, it goes to show that you don't even need fancy elements whatsoever whenever you have characters like Principal Huggins. And to be honest with you, compared to the other characters, I found Principal Huggins somewhat tolerable compared to the other characters that done a lot worse than Principal Huggins. Which is really saying something, because I doubt that Principal Huggins will ever send Lincoln to Canada. Like, he may be rude and really cranky, but at the same time, he would never do that to Lincoln. He can give him detention, which he did at the end of this episode, but at the same time, sending him to Canada isn't even a punishment. Besides, of what he's dealing with along with Mrs. Johnson with the frogs being free from class, there's literally no other option other than either find the frogs or hire someone to find the frogs. But to be real with you, Principal Huggins is pretty much the most judgmental character in this entire show. Granted, there are other judgmental characters, but for him, taking his job seriously as a principal is really saying something. As for Mr. Scully from Chameleon, he isn't really a de facto antagonist considering he's doing his job as a building manager. And to be real with you, compared to Principal Huggins, if he was a principal, I'm pretty sure that he would still do the same motivations in Chameleon regardless. And since there was no other way for him to return since the spinoff came to an end, I'm gonna be really honest with you, you can't form an opinion of him knowing full well that he contributes little other than being the building manager. This is the same person that helped out the Casagrandes in the past, and considering that the Casagrandes are somehow or slightly going behind his back in order to protect the reptiles in order for them, the Chan family, to stay, it's honestly difficult to go against anyone in this episode. But I will say that his paranoia of snakes, mainly Cam, who is the chameleon snake, I'm gonna be really honest with you. The fact that Wang Yan had to deal with a chameleon that camouflages itself, it's never going to be easy to catch a snake like Cam. And considering that this is one of the only episodes, if not the only episode involving Cam, it really shows that his camouflaging abilities made it a lot more difficult for the family. And to be real with you, with him actually rescuing or saving Mr. Scully's life at the end, and the fact that everyone else wins at the end by staying in their apartments, just goes to show that he's pretty much the true hero in all of this. Which the same thing can't be said about Hops in Frog Wild, considering Lincoln and Lana did all the work. But if the other characters in this episode saved Mr. Scully's life and not the animals, then he would still probably punish the characters for breaking the rules. Because let's be real, whenever I think about that alternative way of Mr. Scully's life being saved, I'm pretty sure that the Chain family will probably deal with a crisis of finding a different place to live other than living in the same building with the Casagrandes. As for Frog Wild's ending, after Principal Huggins caught Lincoln and Lana after stealing the frogs, Lincoln came up with a solution by showing the frog film that Lana made to Principal Huggins and Mrs. Johnson. Thus leads to them making a fortress for the frogs so that everyone can see them, and we witness an adult joke with two frogs getting it on. And the episode ends with Lincoln and Lana saving ducks from a French restaurant. The first time made sense, but when it comes to the second time of saving ducks, it just isn't worth it even if it involves cannibalism, because Lincoln may be a good brother to Lana. I don't even think he's willing to save every single animal in the entire planet if he ever became a superhero of saving animals, because I know full well that Lana wants to be a superhero of saving animals from all over the world by preventing themselves from getting killed or becoming food. With that out of the way, which episode is superior? Both episodes have problems that are completely different from each other, and the positives somewhat overweigh the negatives, but at the same time, it's mostly the other way around, because it just really feels like that these two episodes alone did something right, but it's mainly the environment that the two shows are in. To give Chameleon credit, it really feels like it's trying to be its own thing, but at the same time, episodes before that I've compared to the Loud House episodes were trying to be its own thing. Granted, not 100% completely, but at the same time, this is one of many episodes that try to be different compared to one of the Loud House episodes. But in all honesty, Frog Wild is a better episode compared to Chameleon. Because if it didn't have that film involving Lana and Hops, then this episode would have been a lot more predictable when it comes to saving animals, when it comes to the environmental message. But to be real with you, when it comes to TV shows handling environmental messages, this is literally one of the best episodes to tackle that ideal. And considering that in future episodes involving Lana, she ends up doing the same thing like she did in this episode, it kind of shows onto why I picked this episode to compete with Chameleon, because in all honesty, the future Lana episodes are still good, but at the same time, nothing can compare to this episode. Chameleon is still a good episode, but it won't even top Frog Wild. Now, when it comes to the other Lana episodes, it's debatable, but for me personally, Frog Wild wins a point for the Loud House. I'm giving Frog Wild an 8 out of 10, while Chameleon gets a 7.75 out of 10.